There are moments when life seems to tighten its grip on us, when bills pile up, when opportunities disappear, and when the silence of our prayers feels louder than any answer. But what if I told you that your financial struggles are not punishments or coincidences, but sacred messages? Edgar Cayce taught that money is one of the most misunderstood forces in human life because it doesn't just measure your effort, it mirrors your soul's alignment. He said that every financial crisis reveals where faith has been replaced by fear. The way you handle loss, scarcity, or abundance exposes how connected or disconnected you are from your spiritual source. When you panic over money, you are not being tested by the universe. You are being invited to remember who truly sustains you. Cayce warned that people often chase wealth without purpose, forgetting that material comfort without spiritual understanding becomes a chain instead of a blessing. Yet he also taught that financial freedom is not evil. It's divine when used for service, growth, and creation. So, before you call your situation bad luck, ask yourself, what is God trying to teach me through this? Sometimes your greatest blessing hides behind the fear of not having enough. If you've ever felt trapped by your financial situation, I want you to comment below. Do you believe money tests your faith or reveals it? When Edgar Cayce spoke of financial struggles, he didn't see them as random misfortunes, but as mirrors of spiritual imbalance. He believed that our relationship with money was a reflection of our relationship with God. In one of his readings, Cayce explained that every challenge involving wealth or debt was meant to reveal how deeply a person trusted in divine order. To him, money wasn't evil nor sacred. It was neutral, but our attachment or fear gave it power. He said that the soul incarnates to learn how to handle energy in all its forms, and money is one of the most condensed forms of energy. When misused, it blocks spiritual flow. When aligned with love and purpose, it multiplies through unseen channels. He often warned that the root of poverty wasn't outside, but within the consciousness. A person who lives in fear of lack keeps attracting conditions of limitation, not as punishment, but as a consequence of vibrating outside divine trust. Cayce said, "As you think, so you become. As you give, so shall you receive." That wasn't poetic language. It was metaphysical law. The universe is structured in reciprocity, not in cruelty. When you live with resentment toward money, you unconsciously reject the very abundance you're praying for. Every negative thought about it becomes a closed door to what could have been given freely. Cayce emphasized that financial healing begins not in the wallet, but in the mind. He said that those who constantly feel scarcity are often carrying deep emotional memories, sometimes from childhood, sometimes from past incarnations, where loss, guilt, or greed created energetic knots that need to be released. He recommended prayer not to ask for money, but to restore the right relationship with divine supply. He said, "No soul is ever meant to suffer hunger or lack, but to learn stewardship, to know that abundance is not ownership, it is flow." According to him, when we align our thoughts with gratitude and service, we magnetize provision naturally without begging the universe. The irony, Cayce said, is that people often ask God for abundance while living in disbelief of his laws. They seek miracles yet deny the principle of sowing and reaping. They cling to fear and call it realism. But divine law is precise. Faith is the channel through which provision enters. That's why Cayce saw giving, not hoarding, as the real key to prosperity. He advised people to give even in their hardest moments, not to earn divine favor, but to prove to the subconscious that trust is greater than fear. When you give, you break the illusion of lack. Right now, reflect for a moment. When was the last time you gave from your heart without expecting anything in return? When was the last time you used your talents for someone who couldn't repay you? According to Cayce, those are the exact moments when heaven takes note. He said that divine law counts more the intention of giving than the amount. If your soul opens in generosity, even the smallest act can trigger a chain of unseen blessings. If you've ever experienced a financial collapse, Cayce would say, don't despair. It's often a sacred reset, designed to strip away illusions and remind you that true security never came from numbers, it came from alignment. Money can vanish in a day, but spiritual law never fails. That's why he urged people to shift from the question, how can I make more money, to how can I become more useful to others? For him, usefulness was the true currency of heaven. The more valuable your spirit becomes to the world, the more the universe entrusts you with resources. When you stop chasing and start serving, abundance starts chasing you. Cayce said, when the mind and spirit are set upon the service of others, all things needful will be added. He wasn't talking about charity alone. He meant that when you live for a purpose beyond survival, the entire universe rearranges itself to sustain your mission. Cayce often pointed out that many people pray for wealth, but are not prepared to handle it spiritually. He said that sudden prosperity without inner growth can be more destructive than poverty. According to him, the universe never withholds abundance. It only waits until the soul is mature enough to use it wisely. Every delay, every blocked opportunity is not rejection, it's protection. God doesn't deny, he educates. Financial struggles, therefore, are divine classrooms disguised as chaos. They expose hidden attachments and teach humility, discernment, and patience. They invite the soul to trade fear for faith, comparison for trust, and despair for responsibility. He reminded his followers that money amplifies what already exists within the person. It is not the root of evil. It is the amplifier of character. A greedy man with wealth becomes more greedy. A generous heart with wealth becomes a channel of miracles. That is why Cayce insisted that every dollar should be treated as energy to be directed consciously. Bless what you have, he said, for gratitude multiplies and complaint divides. He believed that even the act of paying a bill could become an act of worship when done with the awareness that we are returning energy to its divine circulation. For Cayce, true prosperity always involved purpose. He said that when the soul forgets its purpose, the flow of abundance naturally diminishes. It is not punishment, it is spiritual correction. The soul came to serve, not to accumulate. When the flow stops, it's often a sign that the person is living outside their intended path. He told one seeker, if you desire abundance, seek to know your usefulness. That statement alone, he said, could transform a lifetime of financial pain into meaning. Think about your own journey. Have there been seasons when money slipped through your fingers no matter how hard you worked? Times when doors closed unexpectedly, when effort brought little reward? According to Cayce, those were not random failures but lessons in alignment. The universe was asking, do you serve money or does money serve your soul? Because the moment you invert that relationship, when money becomes the master and the spirit becomes the servant, loss begins. And loss is often mercy in disguise. That is why Cayce often reminded people that the surest way to rebuild financially is not through fear or calculation, but through surrender and service. He would advise them to stop counting coins and start counting blessings, to measure life not by income, but by impact. He said, you will never outgive the source from which you came. To him, every act of kindness, every honest effort, every faithful thought created an invisible deposit in what he called the spiritual bank, an eternal treasury that always returns multiplied results in divine timing. If you are watching this and struggling with bills, uncertainty, or debt, take a moment to breathe and listen. You are not forgotten. You are being guided toward a higher understanding of what abundance really means. The same God who created galaxies knows exactly how to feed your soul and meet your needs, but he's more interested in the growth of your spirit than the balance of your account. And when the two align, that's when miracles happen. Cayce urged everyone to see work not as punishment, but as participation in creation. The energy you invest in your labor, when done with love, becomes prayer in motion. When you work to uplift others, you activate divine flow. You stop being a beggar of blessings and become a co-creator with God. That is the hidden mystery behind financial transformation. It begins not with effort, but with elevation of intention. If this message is resonating with you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and comment your experience below. Tell us what this lesson means to you. Every comment helps this message reach more souls who might need to hear that faith is stronger than fear. In one of his readings, Edgar Cayce explained, that abundance follows awareness. He said that many people ask for more without realizing they are not yet aware of what they already have. Gratitude is the gate through which abundance enters. Without it, no prayer can open the door. He compared life to a spiritual garden. If you constantly water fear, resentment, and envy, that is what will grow. But if you water faith, gratitude, and service, then even in times of drought, fruit appears. He believed the soul that truly understands gratitude will never live in lack because it vibrates on the same frequency as divine supply. Cayce also warned that humanity's obsession with material success often leads to spiritual starvation. He said that modern civilization teaches competition instead of cooperation, and this constant battle for more creates collective anxiety. He taught that God never intended for one soul to prosper at the expense of another. True success, he said, uplifts everyone it touches. That's why he encouraged people to look at their profession as a sacred ministry. Whether you're a teacher, a driver, a doctor, or a builder, what matters is the spirit you bring into the work. The spirit in which you do a thing, he said, is more important than the thing itself. When your work becomes an expression of divine love, it attracts reward naturally, not as a prize but as a reflection of your alignment. He often told people not to separate spirituality from business. He said that the office, the field, the store, and the home are all altars of the same temple. Wherever you bring honesty, compassion, and excellence, you are doing the work of God. And wherever you bring greed, deceit, or fear, you break the sacred flow of supply. That is why many lose money even after gaining it. They forget that the universe gives only what can circulate freely. Hoarding energy blocks the current. Generosity keeps it alive. Cayce believed that financial renewal always starts with mental renewal. He asked people to examine the thoughts they feed their subconscious every day. Do you constantly repeat that you are broke, unlucky, or unworthy? Every word you speak is a command to your inner universe. The subconscious doesn't judge, it obeys. Cayce said, "Every thought is a prayer. When you think of lack, you pray for it. When you think of abundance, you pray for that. It's not superstition, it's spiritual physics. What you hold in consciousness becomes substance." The invisible precedes the visible. He urged everyone to practice visualization with gratitude, not greed. See yourself using wealth to create peace, education, healing, or joy for others. That image impresses the divine law of giving, which must return, multiplied. But see yourself only wanting money for control, vanity, or status, and that energy collapses. It becomes a closed circuit. The universe cannot sustain selfish flow. That's why some people make money quickly, but lose it even faster. Their intention was too small for the size of the blessing. Cayce used to say that spiritual wealth and financial wealth are not opposites. They are reflections of the same principle. Both require trust, discipline, and service. He believed that God doesn't reward laziness or greed, but harmony. And harmony is built through balance between giving and receiving, effort and rest, ambition and surrender. When you live in that balance, you no longer chase abundance. You embody it. You become the evidence that heaven and earth can coexist through a faithful heart. He often quoted scripture to remind people that Jesus never condemned wealth. He condemned the worship of it. The issue wasn't the possession of things, but the loss of perspective. "What does it profit a man," Jesus asked, "if he gains the whole world and loses his soul?" Cayce said that's not a warning. It's a diagnostic. Every soul that worships money loses peace because it confuses temporary comfort with eternal security. The cure, he said, is simple. Remember your source. You don't have to reject wealth, only reassign its purpose. To bless, not to boast. Cayce taught that true prosperity begins the moment you realize you are already connected to infinite supply. He said that God's abundance is not stored in banks or markets, it is stored in consciousness. When a person awakens to this truth, even a small seed can become a forest. He described this as spiritual arithmetic. What you multiply through gratitude always exceeds what you lose through fear. That's why he encouraged people to begin where they are, no matter how small the start. Use what is in your hand, he said, and more will be placed within your reach. Waiting for perfect conditions, according to Cayce, is the greatest thief of progress. The moment you act with faith, divine flow begins to move through your circumstances. He often spoke of the subtle relationship between thought, emotion, and matter. In his view, every financial situation begins as a vibration. Fear contracts energy, faith expands it. When you live in constant anxiety about the future, you unknowingly instruct your body, your relationships, and even your environment to contract. Opportunities disappear, not because heaven is closed, but because your field of awareness has shrunk. Cayce compared this to standing under a waterfall with a closed cup. The water keeps flowing, but nothing can enter. Opening the cup, through trust, forgiveness, and gratitude, is the only way to receive again. He told one seeker who faced bankruptcy that the lesson wasn't about numbers, but about faith. You must learn to see supply where others see shortage, he said. The channel of God is never dry, but your eyes must learn to recognize it. That reading became a cornerstone of his teachings on divine economics. He believed that every loss carries hidden instruction. Sometimes God removes the visible source so that you may discover the invisible one. It's when the paycheck ends, the client leaves, or the plan fails, that the soul learns to depend directly on spirit rather than circumstance. To Cayce, spiritual maturity meant learning to live in gratitude before the answer appears. He said that those who can thank God in the desert will never stay there long. Gratitude turns wilderness into provision. It changes vibration, chemistry, and destiny. Begin and end every day with thanksgiving, he said, and abundance will meet you halfway. This wasn't symbolic advice, it was energetic law. He believed gratitude magnetizes substance, complaint repels it. The heart that constantly complains lives in scarcity, even when surrounded by blessings, while the thankful heart finds miracles in simplicity. He also taught that generosity is a law of multiplication. Give, and it shall be given unto you, Jesus said, and Cayce confirmed this principle in hundreds of readings. But he emphasized that giving should be guided by wisdom, not guilt. To give blindly can feed dependency, but to give consciously expands light. Every time you help another soul grow, you increase your own spiritual credit. Every act of service releases energy that returns in unexpected ways, through health, opportunity, or inner peace. That's why Cayce considered tithing not a church rule, but a universal equation. What flows through you will flow back to you. He often invited people to reflect on what they truly worship. How you cannot serve God and mammon, Jesus said, and Cayce explained that mammon isn't money, it's fear disguised as control. When you depend more on possessions than on the source that gave them, you begin to serve the illusion. True security is not in how much you hold, but in how deeply you trust. He used to say, "You will know what you worship by what you fear losing." If your peace disappears when your bank account changes, then your peace was never in God. It was in numbers. Remember this. The universe is not against you. It mirrors you. Your external world reveals the tone of your inner one. To change the outside, you must first reconcile the inside. Cayce's message wasn't about escaping reality. It was about transforming it from the level of spirit. And when that transformation happens, money stops being a source of stress and becomes a tool of purpose. Cayce insisted that wealth must always serve evolution. He said that when money becomes stagnant, when it's hoarded, hidden, or used for selfish gain, it begins to rot the consciousness that holds it. Like water trapped in a closed jar, it loses life. But when it flows toward good, it purifies both giver and receiver. This is why he viewed prosperity as responsibility, not privilege. You are not the owner of what you possess. You are the steward. God trusts you with resources only to the degree that he can trust you to circulate them with love. When you understand this, guilt about money disappears and fear loses its power. You realize that money itself is not sacred. What's sacred is the intention behind its movement. He warned that people often try to change their circumstances without changing their vibration. They demand new results while repeating the same fearful thoughts. Cayce said, "This is like planting thorn seeds and expecting roses." Thought is the builder, he reminded. If you want prosperity, You must first think and feel like one who already lives in divine abundance. He urged everyone to create a mental atmosphere of peace, because peace is the soil in which all blessings grow. The restless mind blocks miracles. The surrendered mind invites them. He also connected financial struggle to the universal principle of balance. Every soul must learn both sides of the equation, to receive without pride and to give without fear. Many people can work hard, but few can rest with faith. Cayce explained that rest is not laziness, it's confidence in divine timing. Do what you can and leave the rest to God, he said. The results belong to Him. That statement freed countless people from anxiety. To him, success was never about how fast you achieve, but about how peacefully you progress. Cayce's approach wasn't mystical escapism, it was practical spirituality. He wanted people to budget, plan and act, but with awareness that material effort must follow spiritual order. Seek first the kingdom, he said, echoing Christ's words, and all else will be added. That doesn't mean you ignore bills or avoid work. It means you face them with higher consciousness. When your motives are pure, even small actions gain cosmic support. The energy of heaven moves through ordinary moments, through a handshake, a sale, a prayer whispered while working late. He also addressed the fear of debt that many carried. He said that debt, when faced with integrity, can become an instrument of redemption. Paying what you owe with honesty and gratitude transforms karma into grace. Avoidance deepens bondage, but accountability dissolves it. He told one person who lived in constant financial guilt, "Begin today with one honest act, and heaven will multiply it." He believed that each step toward responsibility restores spiritual credit. At the same time, Cayce reminded that forgiveness has economic power. Resentment toward employers, family or society blocks prosperity. Forgiveness cleans the channel. "You cannot receive with a clenched fist," he said. Holding grudges about money, about what others owe or what life took, keeps abundance out. The act of releasing debt from the heart opens the flow again. Many of his followers testified that after forgiving someone connected to money, unexpected opportunities appeared. Cayce's wisdom was simple but revolutionary. Life doesn't give you what you want, it gives you what you're ready to understand. Financial struggle, then, is a teacher disguised as hardship. It asks, will you keep fighting the current, or will you learn to swim with divine law? When you stop resisting, the lessons end. The tide that once seemed against you begins to carry you forward. That's not luck, that's alignment. So, if this message touches something deep inside you, pause now. Like this video, subscribe and share what truth stood out to you the most. Your comment might be the word someone else needs to hear to break free from fear and rediscover faith in divine supply. Edgar Cayce ended many of his readings with one recurring reminder: there is no lack in God. He said that most of our suffering comes from forgetting that truth. We look at life through the eyes of separation, imagining that blessings are limited, that only some deserve comfort, and that others are destined for struggle. But divine law makes no such division. God's abundance is infinite, but it flows through consciousness, not competition. That means no one's success can block yours, and no one's failure can limit your path. The only barrier that exists is unbelief. When the soul remembers its source, provision becomes natural again. Cayce said that every human being is a co-creator with God, not a beggar at the gate of heaven. You were never meant to live in fear of scarcity. Fear is a form of idolatry. It exalts the problem above the provider. That's why he urged people to practice daily alignment, a few minutes each morning to center the mind in peace, to visualize light filling every area of lack, and to affirm silently, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." He explained that repetition impresses the subconscious with divine truth until faith becomes instinct and fear loses ground. He wasn't teaching wishful thinking. He was teaching spiritual realism, the understanding that consciousness shapes conditions. He encouraged people to make giving a rhythm, not an event. Whether it's time, encouragement, or resources, every act of generosity rewires the nervous system to trust the flow of life. It tells the soul, there is enough. And once the soul believes that, miracles unfold. Cayce said, When you live as though you already possess abundance, you invite the universe to agree with you. That doesn't mean pretending or overspending. It means acting from faith, not fear. He believed that even the simplest actions, like blessing your food or speaking kindly about your finances, shift the vibration of your reality. He never denied the weight of hardship. He knew what it was like to struggle, but he saw beyond the visible. He taught that the purpose of financial trials is not to punish but to polish, to remove everything in us that believes we are powerless. The crisis is not the enemy, it is the catalyst. Every loss pushes us to rediscover a deeper source of sustenance. When the job is gone, when the account is empty, when every door seems closed, Cayce said that's when the soul is closest to hearing God's voice clearly. Because in silence, we remember who truly sustains us. So if you are going through financial pain, don't rush to escape it. Listen to it. What fear is it exposing? What belief is it asking you to release? The moment you shift from fear to faith, the lesson begins to complete itself. Abundance is not a future event, it's a present awareness. And when that awareness awakens, resources align, ideas appear, and help arrives in forms you could never predict. Because divine law is not delayed, it's only waiting for your readiness. In the end, Cayce's message about money wasn't about prosperity. It was about peace. He wanted people to live unshaken, to understand that wealth is temporary, but consciousness is eternal. Seek God first, he said, and you will never truly lack. To live by that truth is to walk through storms with calm, to face debts with dignity, and to turn work into worship. Every moment becomes sacred when done in faith. So remember, you are not abandoned. You are being invited to rise higher, to transform worry into wisdom, scarcity into service, and money into ministry. What you do with what you have today determines what heaven can trust you with tomorrow. Keep your heart open, keep your intentions pure, and trust that divine supply always meets divine purpose. If this message brought light to your heart, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share in the comments how Edgar Cayce's wisdom spoke to you today. Your voice might be the bridge that helps someone else rediscover faith in the middle of their storm. They told you money corrupts the soul, that wealth pulls you away from God. But Edgar Cayce saw something entirely different. He said the real danger isn't in the coins you hold, it's in forgetting why you hold them. When money becomes your master instead of your servant, it begins to poison the purpose it was meant to serve. Cayce taught that every resource you possess, whether great or small, is a tool lent to you by the divine to be used in harmony with the greater good. He warned that poverty, when glorified as holiness, can be as dangerous as greed when justified as ambition. Both lead to blindness. One hides behind guilt, the other behind arrogance. So what did Cayce truly mean when he said that material wealth and spiritual growth are bound by the same universal laws? Stay with this message until the end, because it might change the way you see abundance, service, and even your faith itself. Before we continue, comment below. Do you believe wealth can coexist with spirituality, or have we misunderstood God's intention all along? Edgar Cayce never saw wealth as sin, but as a test, a mirror that reveals the condition of the soul. He said that money, like power, only amplifies what is already within you. If your heart is ruled by fear, money deepens that fear. If it's guided by love and service, money becomes a sacred instrument of blessing. Cayce's readings taught that divine law governs both spirit and matter. The same law that multiplies kindness also multiplies whatever intent lies beneath your actions. When he spoke about prosperity, he didn't promise gold or miracles. He spoke of alignment, of using what you receive to lift others, heal wounds, and express the God within you. To him, the real poverty was spiritual blindness, the belief that having little was a sign of holiness or that abundance meant corruption. Both are lies born of misunderstanding the Creator's purpose. God did not design scarcity. Humans did, through fear, separation, and misuse of divine energy. Cayce said, "Thoughts are things, and when those thoughts are rooted in guilt or greed, they shape reality itself." If you believe wealth is sinful, you unconsciously reject the flow of creation that could uplift you and others. He urged people to see money not as an end, but as a channel through which divine will can act. What you do with what you have, he said, determines whether you serve God or self. That is the measure of sin, not possession, but intention. To believe that God despises wealth is to deny that he is the source of all creation, both seen and unseen. Jesus himself never condemned the wealthy. He warned of attachment, not possession. The danger lies not in gold, but in worshipping it. Cayce reminded his followers that spiritual law doesn't punish success, it tests stewardship. Every resource given to you, time, energy, money, is sacred material meant to be used with purpose. When used rightly, it multiplies not just for you, but for the good of all. When used wrongly, it isolates you, feeding an illusion that you stand apart from the divine order. Cayce believed this misunderstanding was one of humanity's greatest mistakes. He saw many souls who, after death, realized that their guilt about prosperity had limited their ability to create and serve. They carried poverty in their consciousness, not as punishment but as a choice. To him, sin was separation, forgetting that every gift from God carries a responsibility. To feel unworthy of abundance is to tell the universe you do not trust its generosity. The irony is that those who fear wealth often crave security, but by rejecting abundance, they reject the very energy that could sustain them. Cayce's readings revealed that divine law is not moral in the human sense. It is vibrational. It responds to the quality of your thought and emotion. Gratitude attracts increase. Fear invites loss. When you give with love, you open the circuit through which divine energy flows. When you hoard or resent, you close it. That's not punishment, it's consequence. It's spiritual physics. He taught that Jesus was the perfect example of balance between spirit and matter. Jesus used what he had, time, power, word, not for self, but for humanity. He multiplied bread not to prove his divinity, but to demonstrate abundance as a natural law of love. Cayce said that every person carries a fragment of that same creative power, but fear, guilt, and the false belief that holiness requires suffering distort it. You were never meant to struggle endlessly to survive. You were meant to remember your role as a co-creator with God. That's why Cayce said, "Use what you have where you are, for the glory of God." The universe expands through service, not sacrifice, and prosperity, when aligned with love, is not a sin, it's a form of worship. Cayce often said that every material experience is a reflection of spiritual truth. He believed the physical world exists so the soul can learn how to apply divine principles in action. To him, money was neutral energy, pure potential, waiting to be directed by the intent of the heart. When people cursed money or felt guilty about having it, they blocked that flow. They created resistance against the very substance of life. He reminded his followers that God never designed life to be lived in fear of provision. Instead, he invited us to understand the sacred rhythm of giving and receiving. You cannot outgive the Creator, Cayce said, but you can refuse to receive. And that refusal often comes disguised as false humility, the belief that suffering is the only proof of virtue. He warned that both greed and guilt distort the same truth, that abundance and service must exist together. According to Cayce, sin wasn't moral error. It was forgetfulness of divine law. When people hoarded money, they forgot its purpose. When they rejected it out of shame, they also forgot. True sin, he said, is separation, turning the mind away from the source that gives freely. Jesus' teachings, in Cayce's view, weren't about condemning the rich, but about reminding them of responsibility. The parable of the talents was not a threat of punishment, but a revelation of divine economy. What you use multiplies, what you hide withers. Prosperity is not given to glorify man, but to magnify God through man's actions. Cayce insisted that when we recognize ourselves as channels of that divine abundance, guilt dissolves and generosity becomes natural. "The Lord loves a cheerful giver," he would often quote, emphasizing that the cheerful giver is one who understands that nothing truly belongs to him, it all flows through him. The reason many still struggle with this truth is because religion, for centuries, equated poverty with purity. Cayce understood why. Humanity needed to unlearn material attachment, but he said the pendulum swung too far, turning wealth into a symbol of moral failure. That distortion robbed generations of believers of their creative birthright. Cayce believed that spiritual maturity means mastering matter, not rejecting it. Every soul, he said, comes into the earth to learn cooperation, how to align will with divine intent. Money, therefore, becomes a classroom where the soul practices trust. Will you use it to serve or to control? To heal or to dominate? To fear or to create? These questions determine your vibration far more than the size of your bank account, and until the heart answers them honestly, no external condition can bring peace. So the next time you feel guilty about success, remember this: guilt does not glorify God. Gratitude does. Cayce's vision of heaven wasn't a place without material things. It was a state of consciousness where everything is used in harmony. He said that when you use your resources with love, you mirror divine order, and heaven begins within you. But when you live in fear, thinking that God is angry at your abundance, you close the very door through which blessings enter. The Creator wants expression, not repression. He gives to those who are willing to give life back through service, compassion, and right action. Money, in Cayce's words, is only energy seeking purpose. It becomes light or darkness, depending on how you direct it. If these truths resonate with you, take a moment now to like this video, subscribe, and comment how you see the connection between money and spirituality in your own life. Every reflection you share helps spread this message of divine balance and awakens more souls to the truth Cayce dedicated his life to teaching. Cayce said that the soul must learn to spiritualize every possession. That means transforming ownership into stewardship. The moment you believe something is truly yours, fear begins to form. Fear of loss, fear of theft, fear of insufficiency. But when you realize that everything you have is temporarily entrusted to you for divine use, peace replaces fear. He taught that the same laws that govern the growth of a seed govern prosperity. You plant with intent, nurture with gratitude, and trust the unseen to bring increase. Yet if you curse the soil or plant with doubt, the harvest reflects that vibration. Money works the same way. When it's earned with integrity and used in love, it multiplies good in the world. When it's chased with obsession or rejected with guilt, it becomes a chain instead of a channel. Cayce called this the law of return. What you send out, through thought, feeling, or action, returns in form. He warned that many souls reincarnate into poverty, not as punishment, but as a lesson in balance. Those who once misused wealth return to learn its higher purpose, and those who once despised it return to learn that material comfort does not corrupt the spirit. Both paths are designed to teach the same truth: harmony with divine law. Cayce said that God's kingdom is not built on lack, it is built on trust. The one who trusts the Creator will never hoard out of fear or reject out of guilt. He will stand in the flow, knowing that every coin is a seed of possibility. And the purpose of prosperity is not self-exaltation, it is the freedom to serve without fear. To give, to build, to heal, to teach. Money simply expands whatever consciousness governs it. In several readings, Cayce was asked directly how to attract financial stability. His answer was always spiritual, never mechanical. He said, "First, know your ideal. Then, act as if every possession is the Lord's." He reminded people that no prayer for money would work if selfishness or resentment filled the heart. The vibration of need without trust blocks divine law. Gratitude, however, opens it. The soul that gives thanks for what it already has creates the frequency for more to come. In this way, Cayce connected economics to faith. Your bank account, he said, mirrors your spiritual beliefs. If you believe in fear, you experience scarcity. If you believe in divine provision, you experience sufficiency. Cayce often pointed to Jesus as the perfect example of divine circulation. The Christ never lacked, not because he demanded abundance, but because he lived in alignment with the source. Every time he broke bread or healed the sick, he demonstrated that supply responds to consciousness. He never hoarded, never begged, he simply gave. And in giving, he received endlessly. That, Cayce said, is the secret the world forgets. The universe does not reward grasping. It responds to giving. When you hold tightly to what you have, you declare mistrust in God. But when you release with faith, you declare that God is enough. In the measure you give, so shall it be given unto you. This is not metaphor, it is law. And to live by this law is to live without fear of tomorrow. Cayce warned that humanity's greatest spiritual illness is forgetfulness. We forget that money is merely condensed energy, a physical expression of divine exchange. When people treat it as evil, they imprison that energy in shame. When they treat it as a god, they enslave themselves to it. The balance lies in remembering that every dollar carries intention. He taught that when we spend with gratitude, we bless those who receive. When we give with resentment, we taint the gift. It's the inner tone that determines the vibration of every transaction. He said the soul must learn to give joyfully, not because it expects a return, but because giving harmonizes it with the divine pattern of the universe. God is the giver of all good and perfect gifts, he reminded. Therefore, to give in love is to participate in God's nature. To withhold in fear is to resist it. That resistance, he said, manifests as stagnation, not punishment, but blockage, the spiritual equivalent of closing a valve that was meant to stay open. He urged those who feared success to examine the root of that fear. Many carry ancient memories of lifetimes where wealth was abused, and guilt follows the soul like an echo. But guilt cannot purify, only understanding can. Cayce said that true redemption comes when you transform what once enslaved you into a tool of service. That means learning to use power, influence, and resources as instruments of healing. The businessman who pays his workers fairly, the mother who shares her last coin to help a neighbor, the artist who uses wealth to uplift beauty, all express divine intention through material means. Each becomes a living channel for God's abundance. The question is never, how much do you have, but what vibration follows what you have? Wealth used rightly increases harmony. Wealth used selfishly multiplies division. But the energy itself, money, is innocent. It is the consciousness behind it that decides its nature. Cayce compared it to electricity. The same current that lights a room can burn it down. The current isn't evil, it obeys the one who directs it. He said spiritual maturity begins when a person stops asking, "How much can I get?" and starts asking, "How can I serve through what I have?" That shift in intent changes everything, because divine law responds to motive, not appearance. When your motive aligns with love, the universe supplies without strain. He emphasized that many people block abundance by believing it's unspiritual to desire comfort, but he explained that God never delights in lack. The divine mind expresses itself through creation, expansion, and joy. To deny that impulse is to deny part of God's image within you. The true act of faith is not rejection, but responsible participation in the flow of life. Cayce urged every soul to look inward and ask, "Am I afraid to receive because I feel unworthy?" He said, unworthiness is the most dangerous illusion of all, because it insults the Creator's generosity. When you believe you must suffer to prove your devotion, you create separation. The Christ message was not self-denial but self-realization. Jesus did not come to glorify poverty or wealth, but to remind humanity that both are tools of the same divine classroom. The goal is mastery, being in the world but not of it. Use what you have but never let it use you. That is the heart of Cayce's teaching. Cayce believed that when a person aligns their desires with divine purpose, abundance becomes a natural state. He said that God does not withhold prosperity. Humans block it through fear and selfishness. To Cayce, every thought of lack is a prayer of disbelief, an unconscious statement that the Creator has failed to provide. He taught that material circumstances always mirror spiritual attitudes. If your mind lives in gratitude, opportunities appear as if from nowhere. If your heart dwells in resentment or guilt, even blessings will fade. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he often repeated, echoing Proverbs. But he didn't mean this as empty optimism. He meant it as law, as real and precise as gravity. The universe, he said, is a field of vibration. and faith is the frequency that unlocks supply. When you think with love and act with integrity, the invisible world cooperates. When you think with fear, you resist the current that was meant to sustain you. He warned that religion's misunderstanding of money caused deep wounds in humanity. The idea that holiness requires poverty created generations of guilt-ridden believers afraid to prosper. Cayce said that such thinking dishonors God, for it suggests that the Creator rejoices in scarcity. Why, he asked, would a father who owns all creation delight in his children's hunger? The lesson of Jesus feeding the multitude, he explained, was not charity, it was demonstration. It showed that divine supply responds to consciousness, not to circumstance. Jesus gave thanks before there was enough bread, and in that gratitude lack transformed into abundance. That, Cayce said, is the true spiritual law of prosperity. Gratitude precedes manifestation. It's not about greed, it's about trust. When you thank God for what you have and use it with love, you declare your faith in His endless provision. Cayce's readings often return to one recurring phrase: be a channel. To be a channel means to allow divine energy to pass through you without distortion. When you hold money in fear, you narrow the channel. When you use it to serve, you widen it. The more open you are, the more freely God can move through your life. He said that some souls are born to manage wealth not as privilege but as responsibility. Others are born with little to learn detachment. Both paths serve the same spiritual lesson: the purification of motive. It's never about the amount, it's about the awareness. The poor man who gives his last coin with joy is wealthier in spirit than the rich man who gives without love. But the rich man who uses his abundance to uplift others fulfills divine law equally. In both cases, the act, not the amount, defines the vibration. In his later years, Cayce warned that humanity was entering an age where materialism would test the soul more than ever. He foresaw that technology and wealth would grow faster than spiritual understanding. His message was not to reject these things, but to remember their purpose. Use the power of your hands and mind, he said, but let your heart remain the master. The moment the heart forgets, progress becomes destruction. Money is not the root of evil. Forgetfulness is. When man forgets the source of his success, he builds temples to himself instead of God. That is when wealth becomes sin, not because it exists, but because it replaces faith. Edgar Cayce often said that when man forgets the divine origin of matter, he begins to worship matter itself. That is when the blessing turns into burden. He saw the marketplace not as a place of corruption, but as a sacred field where spirit learns responsibility. Every exchange, every choice, every motive echoes in the unseen world. Cayce's readings revealed that the soul must learn how to handle power in all its forms: money, influence, speech, thought, without being consumed by it. The test is not possession, but remembrance. He said that even the smallest act done in love carries more spiritual weight than the largest fortune held in fear. The man who gives a loaf of bread with gratitude has aligned himself with Christ more than the man who builds an empire for vanity. But if that same empire serves truth, feeds the hungry, educates and heals, it becomes an altar, not an idol. That is the difference between sacred wealth and sinful wealth, intention and awareness. Cayce's teachings remind us that Jesus never asked his followers to destroy what was material. He asked them to sanctify it. The earth, he said, is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. To condemn matter is to condemn creation itself. Cayce explained that the same divine vibration that forms a star forms gold, silver, and soil. Everything is energy clothed in purpose. Therefore, how we use that purpose determines whether we rise or fall. When people separate their financial life from their spiritual life, they create conflict within the soul. That is why he called for integration: work, service, prayer, and commerce, all guided by one ideal: thy will be done. When a man aligns his business with God's law of harmony, he becomes a builder of light in the midst of chaos. But when he uses that power to exploit, he digs his own spiritual poverty even while surrounded by abundance. He warned that the world's obsession with profit without purpose would one day collapse upon itself. Wealth detached from service, he said, becomes like water trapped in a stagnant pond. It breeds decay. True prosperity flows. It moves through you, not to you. He said the happiest souls are those who use every opportunity to channel love into form, building homes, feeding others, spreading understanding. Do not despise the material, he said, for it is through the material that the spiritual finds expression. This was Cayce's revolution, a faith that embraces creation instead of fleeing it. God does not ask you to reject the world, but to redeem it through the way you live within it. The purpose of wealth is to serve life, not replace it. He called this the law of circulation. What you hoard, you lose. What you share, you multiply. When you give freely without fear, you declare your faith in the abundance of God. Cayce said that if humanity truly understood this principle, wars would end, economies would heal, and every man would have enough. Because divine law was never built on competition, it was built on cooperation. The universe, he said, is one vast body, and every soul is a cell within it. When one part hoards, the whole suffers. When one part gives, the whole is nourished. That is how the kingdom of heaven manifests on earth, not through miracles but through alignment with law. If these truths awaken something within you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share in the comments how you believe humanity can rediscover the sacred purpose of wealth. Cayce once said that every soul comes to earth to learn that the material is the shadow of the spiritual. In other words, your outer world reveals the condition of your inner faith. Poverty is not virtue if it grows from fear, and wealth is not corruption if it grows from love. The divine law is impartial. It reflects your consciousness without judgment. Cayce explained that the soul's greatest work is to remember its origin, to bring heaven into the marketplace, into the home, into every simple act of giving and receiving. He said that the tragedy of humanity is not that we pursue success, but that we forget the source that grants it. When we believe that our achievements are solely our own, we build towers on sand. But when we remember that every opportunity, every talent, and every coin is a trust from God, we build on rock. The rock is gratitude. And gratitude, he said, is the vibration that calls heaven into matter. He also emphasized that spiritual prosperity has nothing to do with possessions and everything to do with purpose. A man may live in luxury and still be poor if he has forgotten why he exists. Another may own almost nothing but live in abundance because his heart radiates service. The difference lies in intention. Cayce said, "You cannot serve two masters, not because God forbids it, but because your soul cannot be divided. When love rules the heart, wealth becomes a blessing. When fear rules, it becomes bondage." The modern world, he warned, has replaced service with competition, gratitude with anxiety, generosity with pride. Yet the law remains unchanged. What you honor expands. If you honor love, your life expands in joy. If you honor greed or guilt, your life shrinks in fear. He urged people to practice what he called conscious stewardship. Use what you have, but always remember the why. Money earned with deceit carries vibration of unrest. It will never bring peace. But money earned honestly and shared with intention becomes living prayer. Cayce's vision of spiritual economy was not about wealth accumulation. It was about energy distribution. The goal was not to own more, but to bless more. He said that when a person uses their abundance to heal, teach, or create beauty, they transmute the material into spiritual substance. Every act of generosity becomes a vibration that echoes beyond this life. That, he said, is how heaven measures success, not by the number of possessions but by the depth of contribution. And when he spoke of Jesus, Cayce described him not as a man who rejected the world, but one who mastered it. Jesus could sit with the poor or dine with the rich because he saw no separation. All was God's field. He reminded his followers that the kingdom of heaven is within, and that kingdom must be expressed through every earthly act. Cayce said this was the essence of Christ consciousness. To live in constant awareness that love, not matter, is the substance of creation. Money is simply love condensed into potential. When guided by the Christ within, that potential becomes light in action. When guided by ego, it becomes shadow, but the power itself is neutral, waiting for direction. And it is that choice, moment by moment, that defines the destiny of every soul. Cayce's final message on money and sin was simple yet revolutionary. You cannot serve God by rejecting His creation. He believed the true sin was ignorance, the refusal to recognize divine order in every aspect of life. He said that material success can either be a ladder or a trap, depending on the heart that climbs it. Those who seek wealth only for self-gratification fall into spiritual amnesia. Those who seek it as a tool for good become channels of divine abundance. There is no virtue in poverty itself, he said, only in the spirit that uses lack or wealth to grow nearer to God. To Cayce, even failure held divine purpose. When people lose everything, it is often to remind them that their worth was never in the things they owned, but in the light they carry. And when they rise again, they do so with new humility, understanding that wealth is not ownership, it's stewardship. You don't possess God's gifts, you participate in them. He envisioned a future where humanity would finally reconcile spirit and matter, building an economy rooted in compassion instead of greed. He said that in that age, businessmen would pray before making decisions. Workers would see labor as sacred, and money would once again represent trust between souls instead of fear of survival. He saw this as the true fulfillment of the Lord's Prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Heaven, in his view, is not a distant place, but a state of consciousness where divine law governs every action, including commerce. Cayce believed that when humanity learns to handle material energy responsibly, the boundaries between the sacred and the secular will disappear. Then giving and receiving will no longer be acts of obligation, but expressions of worship. He urged every soul to begin that transformation personally. Start where you are, he said, with what you have. Even the smallest act of sharing realigns the soul with divine flow. If you give time, skill, or encouragement with sincerity, you open yourself to the same vibration of generosity that sustains the universe. He taught that wealth is not measured by accumulation, but by usefulness. What you keep dies with you. What you give lives forever. This, he said, is the hidden arithmetic of God. To the world, generosity looks like subtraction, but to heaven, it is multiplication. The more you give with love, the more you become one with the source of all giving. And when that happens, guilt and greed lose their power. So when you think about sin and money, remember Cayce's wisdom. The sin isn't having it, it's forgetting why you have it. You were sent here not to reject abundance, but to reveal its divine purpose. When you use your blessings to uplift others, you sanctify matter and turn life itself into prayer. That is how the spiritual redeems the material. And if this message touched you, if it reminded you of the truth hidden beneath centuries of misunderstanding, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Tell us, what does prosperity mean to you now after hearing Cayce's vision? Your words might be the seed that awakens someone else to the truth that God's abundance was never a curse, but an invitation to serve. What if everything you believe about yourself is only a fragment of the truth? What if the image you see in the mirror is just a shadow of what your soul really is? Edgar Cayce said that the greatest illusion of mankind is forgetting its divine origin. You are not a coincidence, not a body wandering through time, not a mind filled with memories. You are a spark of the infinite, a living expression of God's consciousness, temporarily experiencing the limits of matter to rediscover who you truly are. Cayce's readings revealed that the soul carries the memory of eternity, that before this life you already existed, and that within you lies the same creative power that shaped the universe. This video will challenge everything you think you know about identity, destiny, and purpose. Stay until the end, because once you understand this truth, your vision of life will never be the same again. And before we go deeper, leave a comment below. Do you believe you are a soul having a human experience, or a human searching for a soul? Every soul is a fragment of the divine mind, sent into matter to remember its origin. That was the essence of what Edgar Cayce taught. He said that before the beginning of time as we know it, every soul was one with God, sharing in his light, his thought, his purpose. But desire was born. the desire to experience, to create, to know the difference between light and shadow. And so the soul entered the material world, not as punishment but as a sacred opportunity to transform ignorance into wisdom, separation into unity, and fear into love. The body you inhabit is not who you are. It's a temporary garment woven by your choices, your thoughts, and your faith. Cayce said, "The spirit is the life, the mind is the builder, and the physical is the result." Every thought you hold is a thread connecting you to creation itself. When you forget this, life becomes confusion, pain, and loss. When you remember it, even suffering takes on meaning. Because every trial, every heartbreak, every closed door becomes a mirror, reflecting back the question, will you remember who you are? Cayce never claimed that faith in God was blind belief. He said it was the recognition of the divine pattern within yourself. To know God is to awaken the Christ within, that eternal consciousness that existed before your birth and will remain after death. You are not trying to become spiritual, you already are. You are remembering the truth that never stopped being true. The world tells you that your worth is measured by success, appearance, or approval. But Cayce reminded us that your soul's value is infinite, even in failure, even in silence. The real transformation begins when you stop asking, who am I to deserve God's love, and start realizing, I was born from that love. Every moment of anger, doubt, or fear is an opportunity to return to that source. Nothing outside of you can define what was created by the divine. When you stand before the mirror, see beyond your reflection. You are looking at the house of your soul. The eyes that stare back are the same windows through which the Creator experiences His creation. Cayce said that when Jesus walked the earth, He was not showing us what only He could be. He was showing what we all are capable of being. The same Spirit that resurrected Him lives within you now, waiting for your recognition. To see yourself as only flesh is to live in a dream. To see yourself as spirit is to awaken. Pause for a moment and breathe. Feel your heartbeat. That rhythm is the echo of eternity, proof that something greater than biology sustains you. When you pray, you are not sending words into space. You are aligning your frequency with the source that created you. The answer to every prayer begins with the remembrance that you are already one with God. If these words move you, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and comment below what this truth awakens in you. It helps this message reach more souls who forgot who they are. Cayce often said that ignorance of our spiritual nature is the real sin, not evil in itself, but a state of forgetting. Humanity's greatest sickness, he explained, is spiritual amnesia. We wake up each day believing that our story began with birth and will end with death, while in truth, our existence stretches beyond time. The soul does not age. It remembers, learns, and evolves through lifetimes, carrying both the light it cultivated and the shadows it still must transform. That's why some people are born with wisdom beyond their years or fears that seem to have no origin. They are remnants of unfinished lessons. Cayce taught that life is not random. It's a classroom, and every experience, joyful or painful, is part of the soul's curriculum to rediscover its divinity. He often pointed to the words of Jesus, "The kingdom of God is within you." To Cayce, this wasn't poetry, it was literal truth. The kingdom is not in the sky or hidden behind death's door. It is the awakened state of the soul that realizes its oneness with the Creator. When you act with love, forgive, create beauty, or help another, you're not trying to reach God, you're expressing Him. The mind that recognizes this becomes a tool for divine creation. That's why Cayce emphasized the power of thought. He said that every thought is a vibration that shapes the unseen world before manifesting in the seen. If your thoughts are born of fear, you build chains. If they are born of love, you build wings. But this truth is often too simple for the human ego to accept. The mind wants control, proof, and recognition. Yet, the spirit asks only for surrender. Cayce explained that the true awakening happens when you stop seeking God as something distant and start living as a vessel through which God expresses Himself. Every act of kindness, every prayer whispered in silence, is the Creator remembering Himself through you. When you realize this, humility replaces pride, peace replaces anxiety, and life becomes sacred again. Still, remembering who you are is not easy. The world distracts you with noise, fear, and endless desires. It tells you that you are never enough, that happiness must be earned, and that your value depends on comparison. But the moment you silence the world and turn inward, you hear the whisper that has been there since your soul's first breath. You are mine, and I am yours. Cayce said that communion with God is not reserved for saints or prophets. It is the natural state of every awakened soul. Prayer and meditation are not duties, they are homecomings. Take a deep breath and reflect. How often do you mistake the temporary for the eternal? How many times have you sought love from those who could not give it, while the source of love waited within? To Cayce, the greatest tragedy was not death, but living without awareness of spirit. And yet every moment offers redemption. No matter how far you've drifted, the path back to God is never more than a thought away. A single sincere prayer can shift lifetimes of forgetting. Cayce believed that remembering your true nature was the key to healing, not only of the body but of the soul itself. He said that disease often begins in the spirit long before it touches the flesh. When the mind lives in separation, guilt, or resentment, the body mirrors that imbalance. But when the soul reconnects to its source, even the cells begin to awaken. Healing, in Cayce's understanding, was not the act of curing symptoms, but the process of restoring harmony between the spirit, mind, and body. He would often remind people that Jesus healed through recognition, not of sickness, but of divine perfection hidden beneath the illusion of pain. The Christ consciousness sees beyond the wound and speaks directly to the truth. You are already whole. This same principle applies to every area of life. The conflicts you face, the emptiness you feel, the constant search for meaning, all of them are signs pointing you back to the forgotten truth of who you are. Cayce never separated spirituality from daily living. He said that God is present in every thought, every decision, every act of compassion. To live spiritually is not to escape the world, but to transform it through your awareness of God in all things. Every encounter, every stranger, every challenge is a chance to express divine love. When you begin to see the world this way, even the smallest act, a kind word, a moment of patience, becomes sacred. But to live this truth, you must confront the illusions you've built. Cayce taught that fear is the great deceiver. It disguises itself as caution, pride, or logic, but its only purpose is to keep you asleep. Fear whispers that you are alone, that God has forgotten you, that life is meaningless. Yet every time you choose faith over fear, the illusion weakens. Faith is not denial, it is remembrance. It's the quiet certainty that even in chaos, God is still present, and that your soul is never abandoned. When Jesus calmed the storm, he wasn't just speaking to the waves outside. He was teaching us to calm the storms within. Cayce said that when you recognize Christ within yourself, you begin to see him in others. Judgment fades, hatred loses its power. You start to understand that the soul of every person you meet, even those who hurt you, is on the same long journey back to God. That's why forgiveness is one of the highest forms of spiritual intelligence. To forgive is not to excuse. It is to free yourself from the illusion of separation. When you forgive, you affirm that love is stronger than pain, and in that act, you reflect the nature of the Creator himself. And maybe that's the greatest hidden truth of all, that God is not somewhere beyond the stars, but pulsing within your very being. That the light you're searching for has never left you. That heaven is not a destination, but a recognition. If these words resonate with you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Your interaction helps this message of awakening reach more people who are searching for the same truth, the divine spark within. Cayce often reminded those who sought his help that the purpose of life was not comfort but growth. Every test, every disappointment, every loss is allowed by the soul itself as an opportunity to awaken. You are not a victim of fate. You are the author of your evolution. Before this incarnation, your soul chose specific experiences to strengthen the virtues it still lacked: patience, compassion, humility, faith. To the human mind, this may sound cruel, but to the soul, it is mercy. Through the fire of experience, spirit becomes purified. Cayce said that even the darkest seasons of our lives are part of a larger harmony the mind cannot yet see. When you look back years later, you often realize that what once felt like punishment was actually preparation. This understanding changes the way you see pain. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you begin to ask, "What is this teaching my soul?" That simple shift is where spiritual maturity begins. Cayce's readings made it clear that no suffering is wasted when met with awareness. Every heartbreak invites deeper love. Every failure humbles the ego and opens the heart to grace. Even illness can be a teacher, revealing what the soul has neglected. The spirit does not seek pleasure, it seeks evolution. And when you align yourself with that purpose, even adversity becomes sacred. Still, the human heart forgets. It doubts, it fears, it wants control. Cayce's own life was filled with trials, yet he never stopped serving. He saw every person who came to him as a child of God, regardless of their mistakes. His message was never about condemnation, but remembrance. He once said, "You are gods in the making." Not in arrogance, but in potential. You are designed to reflect the Creator's love in form, to bring light into darkness, and to become a living testimony that spirit is stronger than matter. When Jesus said, "The works that I do shall ye do also," he was not offering poetry. He was revealing destiny. The tragedy of our age is that people seek God everywhere except within. They search for signs, prophets, miracles, forgetting that the greatest revelation is already breathing inside them. Cayce warned that a world that forgets spirit will drown in confusion, no matter how advanced its science becomes. The true evolution of humanity, he said, would not come through machines or intellect, but through the awakening of conscience. When mankind remembers its divine origin, wars will end, greed will lose its grip, and peace will no longer be a dream, but a natural expression of who we are. The return of Christ, Cayce explained, would not be a single event witnessed by the eyes, but a transformation witnessed by the heart. The Christ consciousness awakening within humanity. It begins not in temples or churches, but in the quiet room of your own soul when you finally remember, I and the Father are one. That realization, once lived, changes everything. Cayce taught that the most sacred prayer is not spoken with the lips, but lived through the heart. Every act of kindness, every moment of patience, every silent forgiveness becomes a form of worship. He said that the highest form of prayer is aligning the will of the self with the will of the Creator. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions reflect divine love, you are no longer begging for miracles. You are becoming one. Many of Cayce's readings emphasize that true faith is active. It must move, build, and serve. He would say that God cannot work through idle hearts. The divine light within you must flow, or it will fade beneath layers of doubt and fear. You were created to express that light, to share it, to multiply it. So many souls wander through life feeling empty, believing God is distant or silent. But Cayce said that silence is not absence, it's invitation. When life becomes quiet, it's not because God stopped speaking, it's because He's waiting for you to listen. In those still moments between thoughts, you meet Him. You begin to feel that gentle pull calling you home, to remember that you were never truly lost. You may have sinned, failed, and fallen, but the essence of who you are has never been stained. The divine spark cannot be destroyed, it can only be forgotten. And in remembering it, you redeem every mistake you've ever made. The teachings of Cayce bring us back to that central truth Jesus lived and died for, that love is stronger than death. The soul cannot be killed, and its destiny is eternal return to the source. Every lifetime, every relationship, every test brings you closer to that reunion. You are not here to earn salvation. You are here to awaken it. The Christ within you is not a metaphor, but a living presence, waiting for your recognition. When you love without expectation, forgive without resistance, and serve without seeking reward, you are living proof of God on earth. Look at your own life now, the people you've met, the trials you've faced, the dreams that keep calling you forward. Do you really think any of it is random? Cayce said that every soul you meet has crossed your path before, drawn again by unfinished lessons or unspoken promises. Life is a divine choreography. Even in chaos, there is purpose. Even in endings, there is grace. The more you trust that, the more clearly you'll see the fingerprints of God over every page of your story. And when that awareness becomes permanent, fear disappears. Death loses its sting, because you finally understand. You were never just a person searching for meaning. You are meaning itself, wearing a human face. Remember this truth and live it daily. If this message speaks to your soul, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and leave a comment below sharing what part of Cayce's wisdom touched you most. Together, we keep his light alive and help others remember who they truly are. And this remembrance, this awakening, is what Cayce believed would one day unite all of humanity. He said that the divisions between religions, races, and nations exist only in minds that have forgotten spirit. When you look through the eyes of the soul, you see that there is only one family, the children of God, each walking their unique path back to the same home. No creed or church owns the truth. The living Christ can be found in every act of mercy, every moment of compassion, every breath of forgiveness. Cayce warned that the greatest danger of organized belief was forgetting the living presence behind the words. Scriptures, he said, are not to be worshipped but lived. They are roadmaps, not walls. The Bible, when read with spirit, becomes a mirror where the divine reflects itself through you. He often reminded people that Jesus did not come to build a religion. He came to awaken a relationship. His message was not about doctrine, but transformation. Cayce described Christ as the pattern for every soul that seeks the Father. When you live in that pattern, you don't just believe in Jesus, you begin to embody his consciousness. The meekness, the compassion, the courage, the forgiveness, these are not ideals to admire, but states of being to practice. Every time you choose love instead of resentment, you walk the same path he did. That is the true meaning of following Christ. But the modern world has replaced reflection with distraction. Cayce foresaw a time when people would be surrounded by noise, obsessed with material comfort, and yet feel emptier than ever before. He warned that technological progress without spiritual awakening would lead to confusion and despair. And that's exactly where we stand today. Billions connected through screens, yet starving for meaning. The cure is not outside, it is within. When you return to silence and reconnect with your Creator, you begin to radiate peace that no system can provide. Cayce said that one awakened soul has more power to transform the world than 1,000 who live asleep. So the question is, will you remember who you really are? The world will keep trying to convince you that you are small, powerless, temporary. But the soul inside you knows the truth. You are an eternal being, born of divine intention, placed here to manifest love in a realm that has forgotten it. You were sent to be light in darkness, to remind others through your presence that God never left them. And when you live that truth, heaven is not a promise, it becomes a reality unfolding through you. Everything you've been searching for, peace, meaning, connection, it's already within. You don't need to chase it. You only need to remember it. That's the hidden truth Edgar Cayce devoted his life to sharing. That's the message Jesus lived to reveal. The soul that knows this cannot be enslaved by fear again. Let it sink deeply into your heart.